Welcome to the Illuminate Your Essence podcast, where we cut through the distractions, programs, and stories that have created chaos in your life and discover the truth, bliss, and joy that exists beyond the external clutter and resides within. Welcome back to Illuminate Your Essence. This is going to be an incredibly special episode. And the reason why I know this is everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. And I know when you get that kind of resistance, it's like, oh, let's wait. Let's see how this magic happens. Because today I have my dear friend, Liz Stone, in studio, and she is a trauma mentor or trauma coach. She also has a beautiful healing center in Tooele, Utah. And tell us a little bit more about that, Liz. Tell us about, what is the name? What kind of modalities do you have? What is that healing center all about?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Wendy.
Yes.
I'm so excited to finally be in this space with you. I just love you and love following what you're doing. So yes, it's called the Balanced Stone. It's a healing center in Tooele, Utah. And it's based essentially on a lot of different trauma resources, both those that have a lot of study behind them and also those that are kind of newer or that we know are effective. We kind of do a mesh. And so it's a collaborative space. And we have different practitioners and instructors that come in here, different healing modalities. So it's kind of that top down, bottom up, so that you're including the whole body and moving the body, because what we know about trauma is that it's locked in the tissues. So
yeah, which means
our body
that's impacting everything, right? It's impacting every part of our life.
Absolutely.
And before we get into trauma, now, first of all, I want to mention to the audience, even if you haven't had sexual trauma, you've experienced most likely trauma. I don't know a human on this earth that hasn't experienced some sort of trauma, some sort of emotional response that was so big and so heavy, whether it was death, divorce, loss of a loved one, or just anything that ended up being such a highly emotional response. And if you didn't move it in the moment, which most of us don't, you're experienced trauma. And so with that being said, I want you to hang in there with us, even if you haven't experienced sexual trauma, which is definitely something that unfortunately Liz and I both are part of the Me Too movement, which is now going into Time to Heal, because we want to empower ourselves with change and positive understanding for what we've gone through. But I'm going to ask you a question, Liz, because most of us that are in this place where we're trying to make sense and purpose in the pain, inviting us to heal and become a better version or the best version of ourselves that was never broken to begin with. I want you to just explain, how did you get here? What did you do? Like, I'm assuming that you have experienced something in your life that was profound enough that you want to give back and you want to pay it forward and you want to make an impact by helping others that have gone through the same thing. Am I safely assuming that that's correct?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with what you said. If I'm a believer as well, that if you are a human on this planet, you have experienced trauma in whatever level. And often at the center, people will say to me, well, I have trauma. I mean, not like you have trauma. And I'm always like, not sure how to take that. But the reality is, it doesn't matter if it's like the big, holy cow, big T stuff or the little T stuff. It matters where we are in our journey, because we could be at similar levels in our healing, regardless of what we've experienced, because it really is where we're at in the journey, not whether or not we have it, but how we're navigating through that. So I appreciate that and agree as well. So yes, I am a trauma survivor, which is how I come about with the Healing Center. The Healing Center is really my effort to continue on in my own healing and seeking for community, because that was a piece that fell out for me. And so as I've been navigating this journey, I started to realize that I needed to be surrounded by others, and community has been a big part of why we created the center. But I don't know how to say, where a trauma began, but there were some struggles in childhood, just kind of navigating that. But I actually lost one of my best friends and her mother when I was 16. She and her mother were murdered in a domestic violence situation, and it was a really big deal. It was on America's Most Wanted at the time, and I remember just kind of reeling from that. And then I just started to spiral, and I struggled with depression, which I already had, and went through some hospitalization and things like that. But upon coming out, is where I experienced my sexual trauma. And so I was 17 years old, just coming out of the hospital, and I was with a group of friends. I thought I was safe. And so that just kind of continued for me this, they call it trauma stacking. And I would definitely describe, unfortunately, my teenage years as being this trauma stacking. Now, the good news is healing stacks as well. So let's bring that back around, Wendy. If I forget, help me remember to bring that back around, because trauma stacks, but healing stacks as well. So, and then I think I did not deal, like you said, most of us don't have the tools and the resource to deal with trauma, especially, at certain young ages. And so then I found myself in a domestic violence relationship where I was actually held captive for a time. So when I launched in my 20s, I was in full on run, full avoidance, did all the things to run and hide from my trauma. And eventually it just caught up with me. So years later, as a young wife and mother, my world just shut down with agoraphobia and PTSD. And having just described kind of just little pieces of that journey, it's still interesting to me. At the time, I really felt like it was a ninja in the dark. I really felt like, where in the world is this coming from? Because yesterday I was navigating life, right? I was having conversations. I was an adult. I was out in the world. And today I'm like shut down in the fetal position. I can't go outside. So it felt like it came out of nowhere. And of course, we know that those things come up when they come up, and they usually come up when it's time to heal. So yeah, that's been a big part of my coming to this point with the Healing Center.
I love your story, Liz, because it resonates so deeply with my own personal story. At first, I felt like my body was betraying me because I couldn't live life like I had for so many years. And I was doing some good things in the world. You were doing amazing things in the world. You were helping and spreading love and joy. And then all of a sudden, for our bodies and our ability to show up in life the same way is done. And yet that very sense of my body telling me, I say in my video, because I was unwilling to wail and cry and scream, my body did it for me. And I truly believe that that's the start of my body saying, sister, you're ready. You can do this. You're strong enough. But you're not picking up on the subtle cues. So I've got to do a little bit more to get your attention, because you can't move forward with where you're going with the emotional baggage of yesterday. And so I see that happens. And in your case, it was agoraphobia, which I'm sure was so scary and so dark and so depressing and so lonely. And yet here you are with a center, and you're a trauma coach. So you said that trauma goes in layers. Perhaps maybe we can start talking about that healing. How did the healing start? Where did it start? And what cued you into even looking at this?
Yeah. So first, I'd like to talk about what didn't work for me, because I feel like this is super common. And I have this conversation all the time because, Wendy, the first thing that I did was I tried to faith my way through. If I could have more faith, if I could just believe, right? I tried to faith my way through. I really did. And I put a lot of effort into that. And by the way, I just want to say all of these things that I'm about to say that didn't necessarily take care of my trauma get to be a piece. I do believe that they have a piece, like faith does have a piece of that puzzle. It's just not the entire piece, right? It's not the answer, at least it wasn't for me, it was a piece. So I tried to faith my way through. And then I tried to shift my focus to only focus on positive things and be super like positive mentally, just only feeding myself positive things. Again, super helpful, but does not heal trauma in and of itself. Then I went through a huge forgiveness process. And I really believed that if I could just do enough forgiveness, that it would just come up and out and we would be healed, and this thing is done and I get my life back. So this was kind of like what I was going to put on the altar, so to speak. So I did that work and still struggled. And then it was like, okay, service. I need to stop focusing on me, right? So there's truth in this, but you're also the counter. So I want to point that out. There's truth, but there's a counter to this. So in this spot where I had not necessarily navigated my trauma, just service in and of itself was not enough to help me get over that. And gratefully, that journey of serving and looking outside of myself and looking to benefit others took me and my family to Haiti. We ended up starting a nonprofit organization. It's called Empowering the One. And we have had some beautiful, amazing things happen. But coming home from Haiti and still having all of my trauma being something that I literally navigated every day. So I was employing every coping strategy, navigating it every day. And it just began to, it was grating. It was like white noise. It would never go away. And like you said, it kept getting louder and louder, which is our body's beautiful way of, like you say, getting our attention and saying, and what a gift, because just saying, hey, this is important. I want you to, keep breathing, keep loving, and like, let's put this in front of your face. So it got super in front of my face. And in my case, it was physical as well. And I started struggling with anemia and doing all the things, and then starting to have heart issues and couldn't stay on top of my blood and my anemia issues, and everything started to come up again. And that was my moment where I thought, okay, I have done everything on my own. I need to now reach out, and what else is possible? And that the idea that anything else could be possible for my life really comes from being a wife and a mother and wanting to, like, I have a grandchild, I have a new grandbaby. And right, and our posterity, or those that we love, oftentimes give us just enough to hold on to say, maybe, like, what else is out there? And that started my journey of really tuning into my body, which is where the real healing has happened for me too.
So I love what you're saying, because so many of us out there are doers. We're going to do our way to health. We're going to do our way to, just clean up this trauma. Let's just clean it up. Let's just loosen focus. Let's just do it. Let's get it done.
Yeah.
And it sounds like there is such beautiful, oh my goodness. I'm going to pause that for a second. Something came through. It's okay. We'll cut this. It sounds like when you finally surrendered to what was, you stopped trying to do, and you were just being instead of doing. That's when some of the answers came.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it really is, it's a different skill to learn to be than to do, right? Does not come natural, because sometimes those softer, quieter spaces as a trauma survivor don't feel safe. So sometimes the calmer and the quieter it was, the more anxious I would become, which set me into my doing cycle, which for me is an avoidance. Being busy is a big avoidance tool, and it served me for many years. And now it's something that gets my attention. And again, my body will be like, really? Is this what we're doing? And I get to tune back in. And what's interesting about the body, and I know you've talked about this quite a bit, but all of those years running from the sensations in my body, running from everything that my body's been carrying for me and holding for me, until I was ready, right? Like it all just waited. And so like our heart, our body, that's a big thing that I've been writing about recently. It's the first thing that we leave in trauma, but it is in fact the safest place. I believe that the body and the heart is the safest place
Yeah.
for us to be.
Absolutely. Amen to that. And yet you're right. When we are not feeling safe, the thing that we typically do is just leave. And we focus all of our energy on controlling and trying to figure it out in this headspace instead of being in our heart and our gut, which is actually where we should spend most of our time and back down in our body. And so I love that you're bringing this up because so many of us, and those of you out there might be like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what you're talking about. So perhaps we can explore that along this conversation. But that's the safest place to be, is the body, right? And so here you are learning to be back in your body.
Yes. And I love the word learning because this is a skill. This is a
Mhm.
new skill. And I get to, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is agency, like
Mm.
agency and safety, right? Top priority for a trauma survivor. Well, for probably all of us, right? Like we want our agency. So when, how, and where and in what way we process our trauma, we really want the agency over that. So, here at the center or in my coaching, what I'll often put before people are these are just options on the table. These are the things we
Mhm.
know about. There are other things that we're learning about all the time. They're just options on the table. But the next best step in learning to be safe in your body, the next best step for you really is the next step you're willing to take. So it really is just talking about what's possible and letting people get their own sense, let something resonate for them and
Yeah.
say, like often they're like, that's a hard no for that one.
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe later. And by the way, hard no's are often we come around to that and sometimes we don't. But then there's a maybe, but I'll do this. And so great, like following your own heart, recognizing like what you're ready for and
Yeah.
and taking that agency and choice back for yourself is super empowering. Is the way that we take our power back in our own healing.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, to point out, if you don't know whether you're in your body or not, one way that I have recognized is that when I'm feeling a lot of conflict, and for me, that energy feels right here, and I feel a lot of pressure in my head. I might have brain fog. I might be confused and not have clarity in my mind. I start to recognize, oh, I'm up here trying to figure it out. I'm trying to process it with this space that is not going to give me the clarity and the peace that I'm looking for. And it's in direct conflict with this heart space. So it's kind of having this inner chaos. And so I go, oh, okay, now I'm not in my body. I'm not in my body. So for me, I do lots of different things to get me in my body. Do you have anything that works well for you to get back in your body, or are there just lots of modalities and it's just a matter of choosing one that works?
Well, I think there's lots of modalities and different things will, like we say, resonate with different people. But for me, I really identify with what you're saying. That disconnect feels like chatter in the back of my head and a lot of pressure. I also
Mhm.
feel floaty, right?
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
really floaty, and you can't wrap your mind around the conversation or what you're trying to say. And so that is a sign. Like I literally energetically, and I'm literally kind of pulling up and out of my body. So the opposite of that then would be pushing down into the earth.
Mhm.
So then I do a lot with grounding. I also like imagining roots coming out of the soles of your feet. How deep would they go? How far? How wide? And really just reconnecting with the earth using my breath, a really strong exhale. And then I love Qigong. And I'll often do a move, it's called pulling down the heavens, but it's essentially kind of bringing that energy back down and clearing from the top to the bottom and really reseating back in our body. So there's
Mm.
different tools, but it really is that how do I come back in and feel that, like all the tactile senses we can use to come back into our body.
Wonderful. So using the five senses a lot. And grounding for me, literally just go finding a patch of grass that I can stand in with no shoes, right? And
Right.
just feeling that energetic pull that we get when we're actually outside. I typically can't get that grounding feeling inside on my carpet or with shoes. And so I remember the first time I heard grounding and going to stand in the grass, I thought, this is just a bizarre thing. But so interesting. My body knew exactly what it was. And there was a moment in time where I was in absolute fight and flight. My cortisol was off the charts, adrenaline off the charts, middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I needed to run. My body was like, run. And the first thought was, well, I can't run outside. I mean, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Police officer is going to pull me over and wonder what the heck this crazy lady is doing running
Right.
at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I decided to go in the backyard, and it was a June day. So I had the ability to take my shoes off or not have my shoes on because it was in the middle of the night. And I ran laps. And it was so interesting how that process, I didn't even know what I was doing. I just needed to connect to the earth. I was so out of my body, and I was running in that space of floating
Right.
and feeling like I was absolutely out of control. And just the mere fact of being in the backyard with my feet on the ground, running, breathing. Isn't that so funny?
Yeah.
I was breathing. And I mean, I was breathing from my chest originally, but eventually I couldn't take that pressure in my lungs anymore. So I laid on the grass and I breathed through my abdomen, right? So it was interesting that my body knew what to do, but I had to be in such a place of panic and going, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do for me to even, and luckily, even though I was only in binary thinking at that point, I was able to come to a place where my body just said, go do this. And I was like, okay, I'm so out of sorts. I don't care what I do. I'll do it. Right.
Right.
So,
Yeah. That moment of surrender. Okay, I'll do this.
yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you were also intuitively knowing you needed to move your body.
Yeah.
So if trauma is stuck in the tissues and we're just trying to wrestle it mentally, and there's a lot of value to different modalities, like we at the center, we promote EMDR or neural feedback, and all of these very
Mhm.
top down. But until we start moving our body, we need to give it somewhere to go, because that essentially is just whatever was too much, too fast, for too long, right? Or not enough. Just that energy gets locked in our body. So you were innately knowing to run, you were moving, and you were
Yeah.
giving that energy somewhere to go. So that's also like just the knowing in your
Yeah.
body. It was like, I must run. Um, the other thing that you pointed out about nature, I love the sound of water. I love the sound of
Mhm.
wind in the trees and all the things, but we can't always get out in nature, right? Like, oh, I wish we could. I wish there was like a water fountain really close to me. But one of the reasons why I we actually decided to anchor and bring in stones and crystals into our healing center, and I wear them every day. I include them in different things that I'm doing, is just because they literally come from the earth. They have a higher vibration, so we bring them into our space. But I can't always go out into nature, but I can surround myself with those things that have like an
Mm.
earth vibration and that higher frequency. So that could look like stones and crystals, and I prefer to wear them in jewelry. But like I say, I surround myself in my space. It could also be the sound of water. Like you can put on a YouTube or whatever, or have a
Yeah.
sound maker that's creating that water for you. One of the things that if you're just in a meeting and you're like, okay, I got nothing, like I must sit in this chair, water, like being able to pick up your drink, no one knows, no one cares, but actually focusing on when the temperature of the water hits your mouth. Is it cold? Is it warm? And then moving your tongue through that. And then as you swallow, you're literally pushing your energy back down and grounding, because you're imagining that water seeding you back down as an
Ooh,
element
I
from the earth,
love
right?
that.
So
What
where
a
couldn't you do that? You could do that
right,
just about anywhere, right?
right. I love all of these things that you're saying, and the fact that no wonder so many individuals are being pulled back to crystals and the earth. And we can call that woo woo, or we can call it, we're just going back to our original understanding of how we interact with our surroundings. I think that we've been taught for the last 100 years that this is where we need to stay and focus all of our attention on.
Right.
And we have disconnected as a culture, as a collective, from these other places that are so important. And I believe that we're just returning back to what we've always known. And it's just so interesting that if I'm sure you probably have situations too where your body just innately knew. It said, Liz, go do this. And if you listen and you took action, you found the benefits. Maybe not even understanding why, but there were benefits.
Yeah,
So
I agree. Even the fidgeting,
yeah.
like oftentimes when we're anxious and we're in a situation, again, if we feel like we cannot easily move away from this, or I've got to, I've got to be an adult right now, or whatever the story is, right? And then it starts going in our head, that feeling starts to swirl into a feeling of being trapped. And so again, being able to release movement in a way that isn't going to disrupt my adulting in this moment. And this would fall under probably a coping or a self-care tool. And we always want to have some of those, and then a lot of healing practices where we get to move the trauma so that we don't need as many of the coping tools. But you had mentioned kind of that innate knowing. The reason I started with stones and crystals is I used to carry little word stones or little stones in my pocket.
Yeah.
And when I was anxious, I would sit and rub that. And it just was helpful to me. And I'm like, I don't know, I just felt better when I sit and rub this rock. Well, what I have since learned in studying a little bit more is even my rubbing my fingers against this, kind of like we talked about the water, I'm now becoming like, this is my tactile sense. I'm like literally rubbing my fingers against the rock. I feel the texture. I feel the temperature. Is it smooth? Is it rough? Is it hot? Is it cold? And in that moment, what I didn't know is that I was helping myself to be a little more present and a little more grounded back in my body, because I could now feel the sensation of my fingertips. So those little tools that feel like maybe it's just a distraction. It's probably our bodies innately know, like, I need to move some energy right now, and I get that you can't run around outside right now. I get that, but I need to expel some energy, and being able to move your fingers across something, or it's just it's a great way to kind of stay a little more embodied. And a little more safe, present in that moment. So that all came about just because it felt good to me. I didn't know what I was doing. I just needed something.
That is just beautiful. So we're getting in our body. We're learning to be safe in our body, because I know that our trauma responses are so oftentimes that fight and flight. We're either always going, or we're reacting instead of being the observer, and or we're worried about everybody else around us, right? And all their needs, and our needs never. It's almost as if, hey, I didn't get this right for me, but I'm going to make sure it's all right for you, because I don't want you to ever feel the way that I feel. I love you too much. And yet we forget that the one person that needs that the most is us. And so healing is just this. I love the fact someone said 2 nights ago at a presentation that when you start to recognize that you become the observer as your body starts to react, you're in a place of healing instead of reacting. That's when you can start to say, oh, I'm starting to feel this. Oh, okay, I know what this is all about. And now I can pull out my tools. Now I can start to identify some way to get back in my body, to start maybe using breath, or maybe crystals or stone or grounding or whatever. But that is an identifier of you are now becoming aware. And don't you believe like that's really where it starts, is an awareness of this is how I feel. Oh, this is how I feel, because we've been told to disconnect from our emotions and how we feel our whole life. Don't feel sad. Don't do that. Don't react. Don't cry. Right. And so now we're coming back and saying, no, it's time to feel in order to heal.
Right. Yes. And also recognizing that the authority in your healing is you. Like
Mm.
that's your higher self, that's within your body, that's in your heart. That's the authority in your healing. I often would give away my power and I'm like, can you help me? Can you help me? Can you save me? Like, would anybody, anybody save
Please
me?
save me.
Right? Yes. Oh, thank you. And people are happy to do that for you. And they're like, great. I'm so glad you came. We're going to get you all fixed up. And they're happy to step into that role. And I don't mean to be negative. I don't even know that they recognize what they're doing. They really are trying to show up for us in that moment. But when I put all of the power outside of myself, I still feel scared. And for a good reason. I know I'm not driving. And so pulling that back and recognizing that for me, bringing it back, like you said, okay, wait, what do I need? Like you said, I should probably breathe. Let's start there. I should probably breathe. Like, what do I need? And sometimes because our brain, that thinking part of our brain isn't online when we're activated, we literally don't know. I'm like, I can't think of a single thing, right? When we're really activated, the logical centers of our brain are not online. So then that's where we reach out and we say, okay, I have some tools. Can you help guide me in this way? Because we need others to just remind us of what we know, but the best mentors will always turn you back to yourself. So
Yes.
that's the little
Yes.
caveat there.
I
Reach
love
out,
that.
but watch for that.
Well, and I know at least for me in my healing journey at the beginning, I was so afraid of what was going on. Like, what is going on? Am I going
Terrifying.
crazy? Do I need to go to a like white rubber room? Like, what is going on? And
Yeah.
so I was throwing spaghetti against the wall and
Yeah.
seeing what would stick. And it was like, fix me, fix me, fix me, fix me. And I've spent well over 6 figures in income trying to figure it out. And you're exactly right. It started to set in that the people who helped me the most were the ones that helped me turn within. And even emotion EMDR is desensitizing and reprogramming an emotional response, but we're doing the work,
Right.
right? Like,
Yes.
yeah. So thank you. Thank you. That's exactly where I'm hoping individuals listening will start to recognize. And I know that's so hard at the beginning. You're like, I just need someone to point this out. I don't know what it feels like to be in my body. I don't know what it feels like to not feel anxiety and depression all the time. I don't know what it feels like to feel calm and peaceful. And it's finding the modality, or just listening to your body for the first time, maybe being quiet every once in a while, so oh, what is my body? If I were to ask my body a question, what does it need right now? What would that be? What could that be? And maybe just starting to start there. What would be in my highest and best for me to start? And I don't know, Liz, I know that you take a lot of individuals in this space that I just described. What is your words of advice for those people? Where do you start? How do you do this? Where do you begin when you are literally feeling like you're out of control?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that it depends on what is where the biggest pain is, or I don't really like this analogy, but like where what's getting the most attention. So, for
Mm.
example, for me, and what started kind of this journey for me to do the deeper healing was I was having a lot of flashbacks. And so for
Mm.
me, that it was interrupting daily life. And so I sought out somebody. Actually, I was looking for someone else. I was looking for my daughter to get some support. And it was in that moment that I was like, maybe he could help me. So I had kind of become anti-therapist by that point, but I was also super like in a lot of pain. And I remember thinking, I will do the work. I just
Mhm.
don't want to do it alone. Right. Like we just want to guide, like just walk with me. Don't carry me. Don't walk it for me. Just be with me in this space. I'll do the work. Most of us are willing and innately sense that we must, but we just don't want to be alone in it, and we don't know what we don't know. So that's the role of a mentor, right? To just open up what we don't recognize yet. So gratefully, I found an amazing mentor. He helped me process a lot of traumatic memory using EMDR. And what I love about that modality is it typically is your subconscious working things out. And all of the answers that I got in those sessions came from my own recognition and never something that he said back to me. And I remember saying that kind of like dumb moment where I was like, oh, and I would say something that seemed so obvious, but it literally had not occurred to me. And he said, Liz, I could have just told you that, but your own coming to that, your own knowing and understanding was everything. So, so that was so
Beautiful.
powerful. I'm a fan of neurofeedback because it is it's not a passive modality, but it is something that you can use music to help retrain and create new neural pathways in the brain. So oftentimes if you have youth or you have children that are super activated and they are not in a space where you can talk to them about, you just need to tune in and you just need to go out, and we're having, right? And we're like having these conversations, and it's just not going to land the same for our young people, but they need those resources and they need relief as well. So I'm a fan. It works with those on the autism spectrum, or it works with youth or elderly, but it feels more passive, but it's actually very effective in helping to create new neural pathways so that fight or flight cycle that we get locked in doesn't become the pattern. There's this whole other side of the mountain, and the water can go down the right side of the mountain if it just gets a little nudge, and eventually that will be the pathway. So I'm a fan of those for those reasons, because it depends on where somebody is. We really do want to be met where we're at. So if I had met you years ago, like, it's possible that what you and I are talking about right now, most of that just would have been unattainable, over my head, like you said, super woo-woo. So we want to have those anchors where, great, if it's EMDR and that's the step that you're willing to take and you can lean into a mentor safely, then do that. If it's neural feedback, there's a lot of study behind that with PTSD and helping specifically around childhood trauma, complex PTSD, and then bringing the body along. So it doesn't matter if it's yoga or Tai Chi, Qigong, those are things we focus on. You and I share a love for sound healing, using drums and bowls, and even if it's on your phone, like we meet people where they're at and walk with them to the next stop. And then it's like, what else are we willing to look at, and letting them choose into the next step. But we just want to know there is a next step, right? Like, we just want to know that it's possible.
Oh, this is all such beautiful information, Liz. I really feel like there's so many golden nuggets. One thing I want to just point out, because not everybody knows, people will say, what is EMDR? Where do you get that? It's a traditional licensed therapist, usually, that has been trained in, let me make sure I'm saying this, I think it's eye movement, desensitization, and reprogramming. And so EMDR. And so you could probably Google that, or just ask a friend or someone that might have been through the process of releasing trauma. Many individuals know of this technique. It is pretty global at this point. So just start asking and take the first step, and then just make a choice, because the bottom line is trauma does create resistance for basically living the life that you want. The joy, the happiness, the peace, the clarity, the calm is on the other side of that trauma. And so often all of the things that we're seeking externally, we want connection, we want love, we want to feel good, is literally blanketed by this layer of trauma. We can't even find it or seek it or connect it. If we can't connect to our bodies, we certainly cannot connect to others. And so I really highly encourage you to take the first step. Do anything in your benefit. If that's standing in your grass, go stand in your grass. If that's holding a rock in your pocket, hold a rock in your pocket. Whatever that looks like for you, take the first step, because you deserve a life that is more than just momentary glimpses of joy and happiness, but it's this deep inner peace and this deep inner joy. And even though challenges come, and they will come, and trauma still in my life sometimes will rear its ugly head. And I shouldn't even say it that way, Liz. I mean, really, it's an opportunity for me to grow and go deeper. That's what the shadow teaches us so much. So I shouldn't actually say trauma is, rearing its ugly head. It's just appearing and letting me be aware of the next step that I need to be taking in my life, so that I can really get to a place where I am more often than not feeling connection to myself and feeling connection to others.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I love that you pointed out about it's a therapist if they do decide to go that route with EMDR. I would also like to mention that you can fire a therapist. And if
yay.
a therapist is not for you, it's okay to keep looking until you do find somebody. I've had somebody say to me, "I'm sorry, I just don't know what else to do for you." And she was being so honest and vulnerable and just being truthful in that moment. But what I heard was, "I'm sorry, there's nothing else we can do or that can be done." So just know that if it's not right relationship, it's just that. It's a relationship. It's not right relationship. I actually had to seek out 3 people before I found somebody that could do the EMDR with me and hold that space, because my trauma is not little. And so I needed somebody that could hold that container and create safety for me.
Mm,
And the other thing that I wanted to point out is talking about trauma, like when it comes back around for us. Um, I love, I follow a lot of Peter Levine's work, but he has the way that he describes trauma just really speaks to me. And I've heard different people say it different ways, but essentially, here's the gist of it, that trauma is not what happens to us, it's what remains in the lack of an empathetic witness. So
mm,
as we let that land in our body and in our heart, I would just love to suggest that if others are not able to witness you, if they cannot see, hear, or witness you in that moment, then seek others that can. But the witness that you're waiting for is you. So, what would
yeah.
it be like to be that for ourselves, to be the empathetic witness for ourselves? To start, that is the journey of healing. When we realize, like you said earlier, when we realize that it all gets to come home. And that's the book that I'm hoping will be out soon. I'm hoping to finish in the next month, is just that, navigating the heart and coming home to yourself after
Oh,
trauma. Because I did
oh,
all the things, and I'm a known runner. And
oh,
I have run and run and run until agoraphobia is the fear of going out or being outside of those 4 walls. So I ran until there was nowhere to run. And it was coming back home, recognizing that I'm the witness until I see it, hear it, feel it, and recognize that for myself, I couldn't heal. And so that's my journey. Like from now until the end of this experience, that's my path. That's my work. But I
oh,
don't do it alone. I do it with amazing humans like you, Wendy.
oh, Liz, you are so full of wisdom and love and knowledge and this sincere desire to help others through navigating through trauma. I have come to grow to even more of a place of love, um, in what you say, and just you as a human and a sister of mine. I so appreciate you being here today. I can see why there was so much resistance. And what's so funny, those of you that are watching the YouTube version, Liz has angel wings above her. And I have literally been trying to get away from the sun this entire
Oh.
program, and it won't go away. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
where I stand. I'm like, well, apparently the light, the angel wings, like
Beautiful.
we're
Yeah.
we're this discussion has been wrapped in love, because there's someone, and I believe it's you that's listening, that need to hear this. You need to hear that it's time to heal. The time is now, that there are so many resources and so many places that you can start. You just need to take the first step, because you're worth it, and you're worth living a life of happiness, joy, and connection. Your family deserves to see you and feel you in your highest and best. And so I really implore that you start somewhere. Where do they find you, Liz? Because I know so many will be like, oh, she is calling to me. I feel safe with her. She is someone that could possibly be my first step.
Sure. So I'm on Instagram and Facebook, both as Liz Stone and The Balance Stone, or you can go to thebalancestone.com and book an appointment or connect there. You can also find other resources online there.
Wonderful. All right. Well, Liz, thank you so much. I'm certain we're going to have more conversations, especially when we get that book done. Let's start talking about the book and what is, like I want to hear all about it. And I want to make sure that we promote it so that people can get that in their hands so that they can start this process. And with that being said, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today.
Thank you, Wendy. Thanks for
You
having me.
bet. You bet. So, my friends, let's continue the dialogue, the deep dive, and the discussion here on Illuminate Your Essence. I can't wait to talk to you next week. Namaste. Thank you for listening. I invite you to continue the dialogue, the discovery, and the deep dive on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Also on my website. Feel free to download your free copy of the 5 Steps to Discovering Your Inner Voice and begin your journey of discovering the truth within today.